Does Utah have the toughest schedule out of all the teams in the Big 12? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into today's show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with everyone in the YouTube comments. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. There's no better place to make every game and every moment more than with FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to have on a special and first-time guest and former college football receiver. And for those of you that watched the Big 12 schedule release, a familiar face in LaDarrin McLane. LaDarrin, really appreciate you taking the time to come on. And I want to ask a simple question. Is this the toughest schedule in the Big 12? I would go with TCU. Personally, they play 4 11-win teams. That's not even including Bill Belichick's North Carolina to open the year. I do think it's a tough schedule that Utah has, top 5. I don't see it being the toughest. You are someone who broke down all the schedules on the show last week. How do you view Utah's schedule?
Well, when you look at it, JT, I think the main thing when you look at it is the first 5 games before that bye, right? So if you can get through that streak, you need to be at least 4-1 or 3-2 going into that first bye. Now, who are you playing in those first couple of games? When you look at it, obviously you go to UCLA, Texas Tech, everybody's sweethearts for the Big 12 this season because they've got a top 5 recruiting class, transfers coming in. I think that's going to be a big test. Then you get past that first bye, JT. This is where I think the toughest part of the schedule is. Okay. So now you've got Arizona State, you got at BYU, then you've got back home in Colorado. That game, those games right there are right in the middle of the season where you've got to get momentum. And then I think the last 3 games after that last bye, where you've got 2 of the 3 games on the road. So is it the toughest? I think where it is, it's like a top 5 strength of schedule, toughest for the Big 12. But I think they've got some landmines in there that they've got to be careful, especially circling around those byes.
They definitely do. I mean, just the fact that you play, of your 9 conference games you play, 8 of them come against teams who finished in the top 10 of the conference a season ago. 6 of those teams coming off 8-win seasons, not even including West Virginia and another tough Kansas too. So lots of tough opponents on this schedule. But what I talked about a lot on my show, LaDarrin, is you knew the opponents coming into the schedule release, but Utah, I felt like got really lucky in terms of, hey, and we knew it was coming into, but you get 5 home games in conference compared to those 4 road games. No back-to-back road games. And if you were to say, what are some of the probably 3 to 5 toughest games on Utah's schedule? Arizona State and Baylor would definitely be on that list. And the byes come right before those 2. So for as many breaks as Utah could probably get now, and it's tough to end the season with Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas. Not saying it isn't, but I feel like Utah did catch some breaks in it. And that they're fortunate in that because that could be the difference between them making a run at the Big 12 championship game and then for another season falling short.
Yeah, and I think the way they start the season out, everybody's kind of looking back at, back in the day when Utah and UCLA used to play, obviously in the former Pac-12. Yeah. I think that game will tell you a lot, JT, of how they're going to play going into the byes. I keep mentioning byes, and I mentioned it on the preview show and the release show the other day. People think byes are great. Yes, if you've got a bunch of people banged up, but it kills momentum of a football team. And those style of football that Coach Whittingham likes to play, the Utes like to be physical. They like to control the line of scrimmage, run the football. That kills kind of that continuity and that momentum. So, yeah, I think when you look at this schedule, they've got to get past those first 4 or 5 games with Texas Tech. They've got to go on the road to Wyoming first. They play Texas Tech. Who knows what West Virginia really is? You've got to go to Morgantown to do that. So, again, it is going to really tell you a lot the first 3 or 4 games of season, and then how can they make that push in the middle, and then certainly how they finish up on the road, see if they're right there for the Big 12 championship.
It's definitely their goal. And in order to do it, one thing they're going to have to do is probably beat BYU, who just finished shy of the conference championship game a year ago. A lot of Utah fans were really frustrated to see that game in October, myself included. I wanted to be on rivalry weekend. You were the first one who got a look at this schedule. What was your first reaction? And do you also wish that this game was being spotlighted among the other best rivalries across all of college football?
So being in Texas and being a football nerd to begin with, I love college football. This is one of the all-time rivalries for me. And just because I'm a historian, because I love one side is red, one side is blue, it's an in-state rival, a lot of relatives, they know each other. They go to the schools and they cheer for schools and all that. I think there's an opportunity missed there. Yes. You don't have that in rivalry week. That just adds to the pageantry of college football. And then you kind of put it in the middle of the year, right? That's either put it at the rivalry week or make it the last game of the year. You know what I'm saying? That's how you could kind of fix that. So I agree with you, JT. That's an opportunity lost for sure there.
Yeah, it's like I said, many Utah fans also feeling the disappointment there. LaDarrin, you have a chance to break down all these schedules. So knowing all these teams inside and out, I want to know, for me, I'll answer first.
Yeah.
The toughest game on Utah's schedule. To me, it's actually Kansas. I think going on the road to the Jayhawks team, I've spent a lot of time. Utah a few weeks ago was ranked Las Vegas said, hey, they're our preseason favorite along with Kansas State. Even ESPN's Bill Connolly wrote an article predicting Utah to bounce back. Utah got a lot of flack for getting that preseason love. No, I don't think Utah deserves to be the preseason favorite, but I also made this point, LaDarrin. Is Arizona State and Iowa State are going to get all the love, right? With BYU right there too. We have not seen a team make back-to-back appearances in the conference championship game that is not named Texas or Oklahoma in the Big 12 since Colorado did it in 2004 and 2005. We also so often see the regression when a team plays in close games. And who are the two teams that played in a ton of close games and didn't turn out very well? Utah and Kansas. Those teams were both 1-5 a season ago. I have them as big bounce back candidates. I think that final game of the season against the Jayhawks could very well determine which of Utah or Kansas is going on to play for a Big 12 title.
I love that, JT. And I might want to do something just a little bit further. I think Coach Aranda at Baylor, the way they finished the year out, 6 consecutive wins, they get into a bowl, and they lose against LSU. We know that. But they've got a lot of that nucleus coming back. And Coach Aranda, the way his programs are and the way they are built, very similar to Utah, in my opinion. I think that Baylor game is one of those late in the year type games. It's in Waco. I think they're going to be playing pretty well about their time. And if you look at their schedule, the way they kind of shape up, I think that game is going to be a tough one on the road right before you have to play Kansas State at home. So I think that one's going to be a sneaky challenge, I think, for the Utes.
I agree. Utah has beaten Baylor the last 2 times they've played them, but no question in my mind, this year's Baylor team will be the strongest they have faced. And I am curious to see if Baylor is one of those teams that they had finished the season strong. They didn't beat a ranked team last year. They actually lost the 4 best teams they played. So are they going to be a contender in this conference? I'm excited to see it. I definitely think, to me, I'm curious where you fall on this, LaDarrin. We saw Arizona State last year go from worst to first. When I look at the Big 12, you can technically make a case for anyone because of what ASU did. I have 12 teams that I feel like I could make an argument for winning this conference next year. How many do you sit here and say, I have an argument for them to win the conference?
I would probably say 12. I would probably say maybe half of that. I would think there are about 6 teams because they have established like key players, right? There's a little bit of unknown, and speaking for Utah, they got to find a quarterback, right? I think just kind of going off the regular, I think Cam Rising is healthy last year. Or if you have the transfer coming in, Devin Dampier, transfer from New Mexico. If you have a player like that last year, I think this team is a totally different team. With that being said, there are teams with established players like a Tech, like Colorado. They're just going to be at Arizona State. When you look at BYU, they've got a Heisman candidate at quarterback. Sorry, Utes, but that is the truth. So I think there's a little bit of the unknown as far as some of the other teams, and if Utah certainly can get a signal caller, I think they're going to be okay. But there are a lot of teams that have some key pieces already in place that's going to make them kind of the cut and above, just a touch ahead of most teams, I think, for the Big 12 championship push.
They are. You mentioned that elite group. I'm going to be asking you in a moment if Utah is among those teams and a few other questions as this episode of Locked On Utes rolls on in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is the place to be. You can bet just $5, and if you win, you score $200 in bonus bets, and that's FanDuel.com. Yes, the Super Bowl just wrapped up, but that does not mean sports action is slowing down. We just got through the NBA trade deadline. So that means we got the All-Star game coming up, and after the All-Star game, the race for the NBA Finals is on. Is Luka and LeBron, are they going to work? Could the Lakers win the title? How about the Mavs? They made this move to go all in now. Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, what do they have? Giannis and the Bucks added former Ute Kyle Kuzma. Can they put together a season? The Knicks traded for Karl-Anthony Towns forever ago. That's been moving along well. Can Boston repeat? Can Denver reemerge? There's so many great storylines in the NBA, but how about hockey too? We got hockey in the state of Utah now too. So we get the NHL we can gamble on as well. And then when you're also talking about just FanDuel, that's where college basketball comes in too. We all love college sports first and foremost. So I have absolutely loved looking at each and every game on FanDuel throughout the NFL season and college football season. And even though we got to wait till football returns, college basketball, NBA, and NHL have our backs. Head over to FanDuel to get the latest lines and odds today. LaDarrin McLane back with me here. And LaDarrin, we're going to play a little bit of game I call Believe It in the Big 12. These are going to be Utah-centric questions. I'm going to make a statement, and I want to see if you line up with it and my belief of it. I believe this is a Utah team, LaDarrin. They had not lost multiple games at home in a season, non-COVID one, not counting that because fans weren't there, since 2017 until last year. And things got out of hand. You made a note of that on your show too, about how it was we saw Utah lose at home a lot. Like the only team that beaten them at home the last few years outside of the COVID game was that Oregon Ducks team. That was a juggernaut just 2 years ago. So to see them fall apart at home was uncharacteristic. If I said to you that I believe Utah will not lose at home in 2025, would you believe it or not?
I would not believe it.
Oh.
And here's my reasoning. You got to understand who's coming in there. We talked about how Texas Tech is one of those top recruiting class. I think that is going to be a very difficult home game. You've got Colorado, you've got Arizona State, Cincinnati, Kansas State. Mm-hmm. That's a tough. Again, if you played these teams at different times of the year, I might go with you with that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they're playing them after certain teams, right? You've got Kansas State late in the year. You've got back-to-back with Arizona State at BYU, then Colorado coming in. That's tough, man. That is really, really tough. Do I want to see them defend, obviously, the home turf? Absolutely. But I don't know if I can go with you on that, pardon.
Unfortunately, I actually can't even go with it. I just think it's an interesting question. I've said in my way too early preseason prediction that as we sit here in February, I have Texas Tech right now being the team topples Utah. I think this Utah team is going to find their stride and finish the season 3-0, but that's where I have them losing early in Texas Tech too. So moving on to the next one. This is always a hot topic with Utah versus BYU, and you just talked about why you love the rivalry too. I believe Utah will bounce back against the Cougars, and they will get the win in Provo. And I do believe this one, LaDarrin. So what do you think? I
do believe that. Yeah, you go back to the last year's game. Mm-hmm. That game was dominated by the Utes to me. I think it was dominated, and if it wasn't for the penalty, if you agree or disagree with that, the penalty was called to extend the drive, obviously, for the Cougars. That game was in good control of the Utes. So I think this year, obviously BYU is going to have a bullseye on their back, but to get them at that time, you got to go into their place. I think there's going to be an energy from the Utes going out there trying to prove that last year certainly was a game they should have won, and they're going to prove it this year. I think that's a win for the Utes.
They lost the last time they went out to Provo. They have dominated the rivalry previous to these last two matchups too. And one thing that makes it so intriguing now is you get the transfer portal. There are two starters who have left Utah and now are going to start for BYU this season too. So that extra band of brothers battle mixed in there too. So I'm incredibly excited. I want to continue with this Believe game in one moment, but LaDarrin, as soon as you brought up how Utah lost to BYU, I was just thinking about how I just feel like this Utah team, you even mentioned with Cam Rising, had he stayed healthy or had Dampier been here last year, like they would have been so different if they just got good quarterback play. Because, I mean, that's just what it is. Like, I like Isaac Wilson. He tried his best when he was out there. He was thrown in an unfair position when he was on the field. This team did not get good quarterback play. It feels weird for me to say I think Devin Dampier can win Utah 4 more games. And I think Dampier is a heck of a player. But it's almost so much more to me. I just think good to just better than what they had last year quarterback play. Even if the defense takes a step back, it was the second best defense in the Big 12. Utah's was a season ago. As long as you're just getting pretty good quarterback play, I think you're going to see a lot of those narrow losses from a season ago turn into W's in the win column.
You know, college football, even in the pros, the quarterback is one of the main things that really kind of sets the tone for the entire team. And when you don't have an experienced guy, when you don't have a quarterback that you can put the game on their shoulders, well, you're limited in how you kind of manage a game. And I think Coach Whittingham, he tried to do the best he could. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to hope our defense has enough in the tank to hold some of these offenses. They played some teams last year that could flat out put points on the board. That is a tough task to do. Now, if you get somebody in that can manage the game, don't need to be, you know, a Heisman candidate or anything like that, but somebody that can manage it and make the defense have to think about, oh, man, we got to make sure this passing game, we got to make sure that will open up some of the running games, and we'll start to see Utah like we've come to see, you know, when they were winning 10 games a season and 22 and 21, you know what I'm saying? So they get back to that. That's what we're used to seeing. I think they can do it.
My favorite 2 Devin Dampier stats I'll throw at you quickly. He led the country in yards per carry, all players, a season ago.
Isn't that incredible?
And he was also the only player in the country to rush for 1,000 yards and throw for over 2,500 yards. He has to make the jump from group of 5 to power 4. I don't know how you couldn't be like better at the level he was and say like, okay, I feel like he's earned this opportunity to step up.
I think so too. I mean, when you look at him on tape, is he going to be an NFL prospect? I don't know. Probably not, but
it's so early too.
In an elite college quarterback, sign me up. He has all the tools, especially in today's game. And I think you're going to see some differences in Utah's offense this year because he brings in the RPO game. You've never really been able to do that with Cam Rising. Cam Rising was a prototypical pocket passing quarterback. And if he ran, everybody kind of cringed and made sure he got down, right? But I think with Dampier, and I know they got 2 other quarterbacks recruiting coming into that can do a little bit of both. But with Dampier, you bring that dual threat opportunities back to the offense, and I think that's going to be a different style than we're accustomed to seeing.
2-parter for this next one. You mentioned Utah being a team that wants to get back to winning 10 games. I believe Utah will win 10 games. I believe they will get to Arlington this season. Do you believe it?
I don't believe it.
Oh.
And here's why. I think the Big 12, the way things are set up, it is going to be a bloodbath this year. I think the team with 8-9 wins will now be able to get into the Big 12 championship just because now you're starting to see some of these top teams like the Arizona States. We hadn't even talked about Iowa State. Iowa State's another one of those teams too. But, you know, again, you're going to see it start to level out. And I'm telling you, it's going to come back to where these teams beat each other up. And it's going to be survival of the fittest when you get to the last 3 games of the year, kind of what we talked about earlier, you know, how the Utes finish. That could determine them getting to an 8th win or a 9th win in the season. So I don't think they'll get to 10, but I think they'll definitely be up in that 8 to 9 win range.
Okay, you had me in the first half on your answer. I was like, oh no, but then you won me over in the end. So I like it. If they can get 9, however they can get to Arlington, I would be pleased. Last question, LaDarrin. I believe this will be Kyle Whittingham's final year. Felt like it was supposed to be last year. His competitive juices just didn't feel like he wanted to go out like that. Yeah. Coming back for one more year, you name the head coach in waiting now. He will have had that title for a couple seasons. I just feel like this is it for Kyle Whittingham. How do you see it?
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why he did come back, because this team has something to it. We talked about Dan Pure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a quarterback potentially in place, and that would get any coach excited. The defense is going to be there. Special teams is going to be there, right? That's just the DNA of Utah football. But now you've got something special that you hadn't had in a long, long time. Maybe Alex Smith. I think Alex Smith back in the day when he was doing all the RPO stuff, right? Now you've got that kind of quarterback back. That would be exciting for Coach Whittingham. And I agree. I think how they finish this year, if they are competitive, I still think he wants to go out as a champion. And I think this could be the last year for sure.
It's definitely the goal. Be interesting to see if he can do it. But no matter if this is his last year or whenever he is, recruiting is always going to have a place in college football and going to continue to define so many teams and programs' success. You can't just do portal. You have to do a mix of both in today's age. And there is nowhere for my money to have a recruiting in than in Texas. We are going to be talking about the importance of recruiting Texas strong in one moment. LaDarrin McLane back with me here. Fun fact, let everyone in behind the curtain. I was able to determine a little bit of research that LaDarrin once covered one of my high school football games when I used to play in Texas. So it's a small world for sure. But I've always been, it's not just from playing there, but like you just see the talent. There's so many guys that come out and come through. It's always been important to recruit Texas. It's one of the three best states, Texas, California, Florida. I always lean Texas, as I said, but you just see so many good college football. I mean, just good football players come out of Texas, and it's now become, Utah had been recruiting even when they're in the Pac-12. I feel like it's even more important now that they're in the Big 12 to recruit Texas strong, LaDarrin.
Yeah, I think so too, because there's so many Texas teams in the Big 12, right? So they already have that home court advantage to get to some of these talented players in the state of Texas. Listen, Utah, I believe, had 7 recruits in this recent class from the state of Texas. They've got a running back from Aledo. They've got a running back from North Crowley. Mm-hmm. Anybody from North Crowley's offense that won this state championship the past year, you have won. Any player off that offensive team, and you might as well say the defense too. Yes, Texas has elite talent. I think Ohio probably can say something. They've won a national championship, all that. But I think you have to start there. Because that's what Texas Tech is doing. That's what Baylor is doing. Those TCU, certainly that's in the back. They're in the backyard of all these high schools. The fact that Utah does make it a point every year, and they obviously go to California, they obviously do in-state for sure. But the fact that Texas is there only is going to keep you at that level because the talent is spread out across the state. Something serious.
It is something serious. And you mentioned, hey, I appreciate you doing your homework coming on, that Utah has already gotten a couple of guys in this recruiting class from Texas. Talking about those guys a little, like Shelton Fuller is a guy I'm a huge fan of. Daniel Bray, another one too. What stood out to you about their games if you got the chance to cover them? And what do you anticipate for them at the collegiate level?
So Daniel Bray, he got overshadowed obviously by the quarterback and the receiver on that offense. But we had them, I believe, earlier in the year doing the high school games of the week in Dallas-Fort Worth. I just love the fact that he's one of these elusive type backs that he can carry the rock 20 times if you wanted him to do that. He's physical enough to do it, but he's also talented enough and versatile enough to certainly be, in the passing game. And I think that's where the running back is certainly going. When you look at Guillory, I think from Aledo, Guillory is a physical back. He comes from the Aledo Bearcats, the only team in the state of Texas with double-digit state championships. They're on the Mount Rushmore. You get that kind of player from there. That's where you're trying to build the nucleus of your team. And so, I think they've done a good job. They've got 3 defensive backs, 2 of them from Arlington High School. Those 2 defensive backs were certainly some of the top ones in the area. You just hear their names pop up every single week. And so I think the Utes did very good on what they certainly were pinpointing skill players specifically, it looks like, from the state of Texas.
I feel like they got a good group of recruits in. I'm excited to see how this group comes together. We'll see how many of these guys contribute in 25, but it definitely will be 26 and just later on down the road. LaDarrin, this was so much fun. Really appreciate you coming on. Please let everyone know where they can find more of your content and follow you at. Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, man. Anytime. Let me know. Yeah. And then what's your X handle? Oh, it's LaDarrin _McLane or at LaDarrin _McLane. Make sure you guys head over and give him a follow. And thanks again, LaDarrin. Hey, JT, my pleasure, buddy. That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics. We hope you'll join us then.